The Cold War, Korea, Vietnam, Nixon, Congress, and hippies. What do these things all have to do with each other? Today, we will be focusing on the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Hello, welcome to Crash Course History. My name is Aiden Cubbage, and today we're traveling to Southeast Asia to talk about the Gulf of Tonkin affair. So in order to start, we're going to need some context. By 1964, the Cold War was really starting to heat up. The United States feared the spread of communism and believed in domino theory, which stated that if one country in Asia fell to communism, then there would be a domino effect and the rest of Asia may fall. This started US intervention into Korea, when Northern Communist Party invaded the rest of the country. Now, here's where wordplay is important. President Harry Truman at the time didn't want to go to Congress for approval for the war, so he called it a UN police action. Oh, Truman. The United States decided they were going to push into North Korea to unite the peninsula, which, if you've seen a map in the past 7 years, you know that went very, very bad. So anyway, Korea declared a ceasefire that lasted until today, but unto Vietnam, in a very similar situation to Korea. Now it's time for a geography lesson. Welcome to History 101. This is Vietnam. Now, after a bloody revolutionary war, Vietnam managed to repel French imperialism. Now, after this war, they were at a crossroads. The South Vietnamese wanted to embrace a more traditional capitalistic society, while the North wanted to unite under leader Ho Chi Minh for a communist society. This right here is Laos. Laos supported North Vietnam and leader Ho Chi Minh. Laos allowed the Ho Chi Minh Trail to go across pretty much the entire Vietnamese peninsula. Now, this allowed supplies to travel through Vietnam, giving the North a crucial advantage. The United States didn't take too kindly to this, and in Operation Rolling Thunder, dropped more bombs on Laos than any other country ever. Laos, to this day, remains the most bombed country ever. North Vietnam united under ruler Ho Chi Minh, and the US was not happy about it. Now here's where Harry Truman's wordplay comes in. President Johnson really wanted to send in the troops, but Congress was weary after the UN police action stunt. So they weren't about to let President Johnson send in the troops without permission from them. Johnson didn't want the Congress to be saddled with deciding what to do, so he wanted permission to just do it himself. But Congress would never give that to him. Right, guys? Right, guys? On the night of August 2nd, 1964, the USS Maddox was conducting routine patrols when, in the fog of night, they were attacked by the Vietnamese. The fighting was brief but fierce, and the Maddox had to leave the South China Sea. Congress was completely shocked and feared the worst, and Lyndon B. Johnson offered a strong voice of leadership in this time, and once again asked for more power in military action over South Asia. Congress quickly and easily passed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which authorized President Johnson to take any measures he believed were necessary to retaliate and promote the maintenance of international peace and security in Southeast Asia. This essentially allowed the president to declare war without anyone else's approval. President Johnson would make quick use of this power as he commenced Operation Rolling Thunder later that year, which would see more bombs dropped on Vietnam than dropped in the entire Eastern Front on World War II. On November 1st, 1965, war was declared on Vietnam. Now, in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, 1,291,000 people died. During this conflict, 55,000 young American lives were lost. President Johnson became increasingly unpopular, and his dictatorial tendencies became increasingly scrutinized, which is why in 1968, a silent majority elected law and order Republican Richard Nixon, who quickly began to pull the troops out of Vietnam. In order to understand this conflict more, we need to understand who is leading these countries. This is Ho Chi Minh, and this is Ngo Dinh Diem. Now, while they may both seem like sweet old men, I can assure you they were not. Both of them were murderous dictators. Ho Chi Minh was a communist who was actually relatively popular among the North Vietnamese. However, he massacred a lot of Southern sympathizers, and he was responsible for some of the worst atrocities of the war and covering up those atrocities. Now, this is No Den Dien. He was actually not elected, and he worked to oppress Buddhists in southern Vietnam, which led to him being relatively unpopular, and he only was able to remain in power because of US. After the troop pullout, after the United States pulled their troops out of South Vietnam, it was only a matter of time, and in less than 2 years, South Vietnam was no more. Now, you're probably wondering what happened to Mr. No Den Dien. He was arrested and assassinated shortly after the invasion began. And just like that, South Vietnam was no more, and North Vietnam united the entirety of Vietnam under one communist Vietnam. This was a major failure of US foreign policy. It was the first war that the United States had lost in its history, and while domino theory didn't quite take effect, communism's influence certainly did affect a lot of the country. Now, the Gulf of Tonkin incident remains one of the greatest incidents in American history. Why, you might ask? Well, what if I told you that the entire incident may have never happened? Now, this approximate location is where the Maddox claims to have been attacked. However, the Vietnamese reported that there was no boats patrolling the area of the Gulf of Tonkin that night. Now, of course they could be lying. However, there is only verbal evidence of this altercation ever taking place. One bullet was found inside the Maddox boat. However, the round was unconfirmed to have matched any of the Vietnamese guns. Now, there could have very well been this scuffle that was claimed by the Maddox. However, if only the crewmen state that they were attacked, and there's no circumstantial evidence to prove that they actually were attacked, did it really happen? To this day, nobody knows. However, the aftermath of this attack left over 1 million people dead. In 1971, 3 years into the Nixon administration, Congress, fearing another incident may happen again, where a president just sends in troops without congressional approval, Congress decided to do something. They quickly passed the War Powers Act. In the aftermath of the Vietnam War, Congress, fearing another event like this might happen again, decided it was time to make a change. Congressman Sherman came up with the War Powers Resolution Act. The War Powers Resolution Act decided that the president's responsibility to declare war without congressional approval would be hindered severely, essentially repealing the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Now, this act was extremely popular in the House and Senate. However, when it got to Richard Nixon's desk, it was immediately vetoed by him. Now, this is one of the very rare moments in American history where bipartisan unity won out, and Republicans and Democrats together decided to overturn Richard Nixon's veto with a 2/3 majority, and the War Powers Resolution Act was passed in 1973. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely this would have limited all presidential powers in warfare, and another incident like this would never happen again, where a president could just send in troops wherever, right? No, not really. Ever since, we've just gone back to the old Harry Truman way of calling it police interventions, or just not even saying it's a war at all, and sending the troops in wherever the president pleases. Now, that doesn't mean that these resolutions have had zero impact. Both of these bills are commonly brought up in the Congress and the Senate when talks about presidential war power and executive responsibility are brought up. Now, that's all I have for you today. Please, if you have any questions or concerns, leave them in the comments down below. I'll be happy to respond. For now, this has been Crash Course History with Aiden Cubbage, signing out.